This is Trend Following Radio, where great thinking comes alive. Nobel Prize winners, legendary traders, best-selling authors, and the pros that know what drive us irrational human beings. I am your host, MICHAEL COVEL. Not filtered, raw, honest. That's my passion. My guest today is Tom Asacker. This is Tom's second appearance on my show. Our conversation today is inspired by his newest work, I Am Keats, Escape Your Mind and Free Yourself. Tom has a very unique, frankly, great perspective on the human condition. I guarantee you that there is some way to bring yourself to a level of improvement by listening to Tom. No doubt. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Tom Asacker. A lot of people don't realize that every holiday season, the Sci-Fi Channel runs a Twilight Zone marathon. And there is one of my favorite episodes that happened to appear this year, and I happened to watch it, with the great character actor Roddy McDowall, and he and another associate, they're two astronauts, and they're preparing to go to Mars for the first time. And Roddy McDowall is kind of nervous and a little bit not really sure, and he's not so adventurous, kind of funny for an astronaut. And his associate is very optimistic and very, let's go do this anyways. So they get on the flight to go to Mars. They crash land. His associate dies, and his associate really dies because Roddy McDowall is so nervous to open the door to get help if he can get help. Of course, it's the Sci-Fi Channel, it's the Twilight Zone, it's all made up. But anyways, his associate dies. But then the door finally opens, and there's a bunch of people out there that look like humans. And so Roddy McDowall has his gun in his hand, ready to shoot them, and then he kind of like all of a sudden feels happy that he doesn't have to shoot them or whatever. They're very nice to him. They take him to a house. They put him in this house, and he's like, oh my gosh, it's like a complete 1960s style house. He's so happy, so excited. It's just like he expected, just like he feels so comfortable, so secure. They say, hey, hold on for a second. We'll be back in a little while, and they leave him alone. Then he starts realizing there's no windows, there's no doors, there's nothing. He realizes he's locked in. He realizes that he might be, he doesn't really know yet, but he finally, the window opens and there's bars and that everyone's looking in at him. And he realizes, he looks down and he sees a sign, and the sign says, Earthman in natural habitat. He was put into a zoo, now a physical zoo, a physical cage. But I wonder with that episode, if he would not have held the gun out, if he would not have shown these people, these Martians, that he was scared, and he was the typical character of what they might expect from Earthmen. If he would have shown something different, if he wouldn't have been in, because frankly he ended up in the physical cage, but he was really in a mental cage to start with. And I was thinking about that as I was reading your work, and I want to quote from you now. It says, we're confined in mental prisons of our own creation, and the locks to those cells are the stories we tell ourselves. Stories that are make-believe. We make them up, or others make them up for us, and eventually we come to believe them. We call those inherited and learned accounts of life reality. So this is what I was thinking about when we decided to talk today.
No, that was a great, I've seen that episode, but I never thought of it that way. Did his belief and how he came across to the Martians end him up in that cage? There's your metaphor right there, that our beliefs are the things that cage us. And then that was probably, who knows? The people that wrote these shows, right? Sterling and the rest of these guys, they had wonderful imaginations, and they were trying to get across messages with these old sci-fi shows. So that may have been one of the messages.
It really struck me, though, beyond the Twilight Zone episode, it struck me digging into your newest work, the idea of a cell, a mental cell. And it does, regardless of one's point or stature in life, when you start to read where you go in your work and you immediately force people to think about the idea of being in a cell, every last person on this planet is in some form of a cell. that they have created or someone else has created for them. Get me into this thinking, though, you starting with this cell. How did you realize you were in a cell?
I felt, honestly, like I couldn't make a decision. The interesting thing is that's what I study and that's what I teach, how to make decisions, how people make decisions. My last book that we talked about a few years back, which was about belief, talked about how beliefs are formed. The interesting thing, and I didn't really even realize it until I got into this, is that, you can't think your way out of a cell because beliefs are driven by a desire. So you have to have a feeling that will pull you out of your conditioned mindset, the cell that you live in. And it's that feeling, that desire, that intuition, that instinct, that if you follow it, will get you out. But thinking about it just keeps you in, I said once to somebody that thinking, they say think out of the box. And I say thinking is the box. The conditioned way that we approach the world, the fact that we think we know everything, and it's only based on our experiences, which are limited. So how can we possibly know everything? So we have to stop this incessant thinking, and when we get this feeling that drives us, we have to somehow be able to shut off all of that knowledge and move our way into this future and out of that cell, which thinking is that cell.
Not to bore the audience too much, they've heard my story, but I want to use my personal situation to kind of fill that in, because I think it really made me think. I was like, oh gosh, how have I approached the last 20 years? Well, in 1996, I felt like I had to put up a website, period. There wasn't any economics that supported it. There wasn't anything that said, I must do this. This is going to make money. This is going to make me happy.
You didn't run a business model, did
No,
you?
I had to put the website up. It felt like something was happening that I had to do. Now, roll forward 8 years or 6, 7 years after that, and some nice success online. I just felt like I had to do a book. I didn't have any kind of economic plan or anything like that. A few years after that, the opportunity, I just looked around. I was like, well, gosh, other people are making these documentary films, Michael Moore, etc. I felt like, well, why not me? I need to do this. And roll forward a couple more years, and I'm traveling throughout Asia, and I'm like, I just feel like I need to stay here. I don't need to go back to San Diego. And none of this was really a well thought out plan. It was literally just falling off a ledge. And I mean, I felt comfortable falling off the ledge, and I'm not trying to say I'm all that, but I look back, those are 4 key things in my life that I think fit right into where you're trying to get the audience to go.
Yeah. And interestingly, you bumped into favorable circumstances once you jumped off that cliff. See, that's the interesting thing. The metaphor I used with belief was crossing a bridge. The metaphor that I use with this process, which is not belief, because you don't really have this perfect vision of what the future is, and you don't have the stable bridge to walk across this chasm. You're taking a leap of faith because something feels right to you. And then what you figure out is how to, I don't know who said it, Ray Bradbury maybe, he said, build your wings on the way down. Start your website, figure it out as you go. Write your book. You'll figure out how to do it. We are becoming slaves now to data and to the rational thinking process. And it's talking a lot of us out of doing things that we should really be doing to change our own lives and to change the world, to change other people's lives.
Tom, when I started a website and a book, I had no ability to code or write.
There you go.
Right. I mean, it was like, okay, I'm in it now. I guess one of the motivations I had, I don't know how you would feel about this, but once I made the decision to leap, I then felt like, well, I have to do this. I have to figure it out. I can't go back now. I don't want to go back now. Going back is I don't know, giving up, throwing, you're just kind of not trying. Okay, if some other smart person can do it, why not me?
Yeah. See that, and that's the other idea that I try to weave into the book, is that we have this thinking, this narrative thinking, that we have a story, and our past determines who we are today, and so we want to keep the story coherent, and we want to make sure that what we're doing makes sense. And this is pretty much subconscious, It's like we think of doing something and then we say, well, wait a minute, that's not me, and it's really funny because who's you? I mean, why can't you? Why can't you just stop everything you're doing and do something else if you want? Or don't stop what you're doing, but do something way out of the box just because you feel like it. Who says you can't? But we have this conditioned, and it's society that does it. It's everyone around us that does this. It's this idea that we're stories, that we're characters in a story, that does this to us, and it prevents us from realizing, no, we're dynamic. We're not these static characters. We can do anything we want to do.
Yeah, a great example of this. I read an article the other day. It was a profile of Peter Thiel, the entrepreneur. He was talking about people in the Washington, D.C. area. I grew up in that area, so I know it well. He said, this is the one area where they value input more than output. And he said, if you go to a meeting in D.C., it's a 15-minute monologue describing your CV back to 7th grade. But all of those people, plenty of high IQ people in that area making a lot of money, but they don't seem to understand that script was given to them. That script doesn't exist. It's not real. There's no such thing, but they truly believe they have to follow that script or what? They're going to die? Oh, by the way, we all die.
No, see, you're absolutely, that's how powerful this is. This illusion, that we have this identity, this manufactured identity that's part of the world. That's what drives us to really emphasize this idea of we can think our way through everything, and that we are characters in stories. And it makes us become static. Look, Michael, I still do this whole idea of what a brand is. People would say things like stick to your knitting if you're a brand. They would.
What does that mean?
Yeah, they would use that kind of terminology, or they would tell you that your identity is destiny. And I would listen to this and I would say, wow, how confining is that? When you have the resources and the intellect and the money to do anything to serve the marketplace, why would you want to live in this story that says this is who we are? Who you are is what you create, not what you did in the past. But people get stuck in that. Organizations in a big, big way get stuck in that.
I love this line from your newest work. When you're stuck between a rock and a hard place, you must use the rock to break through the hard place. You have to use your mind to escape your mind and free yourself. Boy, that's tough because a lot of people don't even know they're in the middle of that hard place.
No, I know. I try to tell people that I'm working with on these concepts, do not try to wake someone up that wants to stay asleep, and that's the problem with a lot of people, is that when you say something like that, when you tell them, you're living a role, you're not really conscious, they take it personally because they don't want to wake up. But if you get to people that are waking up, that are feeling uncomfortable, that are saying there has to be more than this, why am I still doing this? There has to be a better way. Then you can approach them and say, okay, let's start having you listen to what your mind is telling you, and let's understand why it's telling you that. And then you'll see that there is not a reality behind that. It's all invented by other people and by you.
Why do you think they take it personally? I wonder, is it just because they're confronted perhaps with the first time where somebody sees through them?
No, I think it's an affront to their identity. I think anyone that's living some type of story, I think they take their story personally, and that they have actually believe that they are that identity, whoever it is, because that's the projected self that they project to the world. And see, they believe that the world is that drama of the world is the place that's going to get them everything that they need to be fulfilled in life. They don't realize that their essence, their true self, their authentic self, this dynamic essence that says, I can do anything I want to do. I can try anything I want to try. That's the source of a fulfilling, exciting, meaningful life. But they don't think that is. They think it's the world and others. Like you said, people going back and telling you their whole CV. Who cares? Let's talk about what we're doing, not what we've done or who we were.
You know, I just spent 2 months in America. I spent most of my time in Southeast Asia, across Asia. I spent 2 months in America. Of course, a ton of people, friends and family, they want to know about perhaps living in Saigon. They want to, they get a chance to meet my Vietnamese fiance. What's interesting is you can tell all the stories to people, and people are kind of interested. But I found this weird little thing in my world where now that there's going to be a wedding in Vietnam, all of a sudden the bucket list thing starts to go off. Like, hold on, now I've got an excuse to try something crazy because I have a safe space to go to. Michael is going to have a wedding, so now I can do it. But if not for the wedding, I mean, I've talked to people for 3 or 4 years about being part of this part of the world. Very little interest. But now when I give them kind of a reason, they'll jump. Everyone's just playing it safe.
Nope, you're exactly right. You know, it's interesting. I learned a lot of this. Well, I didn't learn it. I discovered a lot of the parallels between people living in stories when I was while I was writing a screenplay. And so I started researching all of the concepts that go into the screenplay. And there's this one particular concept that is critical, and that's the inciting incident. And so they take this protagonist in this particular story, and really early on in this story, in this movie, there's an inciting incident, and that forces the protagonist to go on some type of journey, to discover themselves and to change and grow. The tornado takes Dorothy away. She's not going to go to Oz unless the tornado takes her, right? And it's funny, in life, a lot of people have to wait for an inciting incident, like a heart attack, a divorce, being fired from their job, whatever it happens to be, in order to break free of the story and to go on an exciting adventure and change their life. But guess what? They don't have to do that. They don't have to wait for an inciting incident because they are in charge of making the decisions of how their life's going to unfold. They can do it whenever they want to do it. So why do we wait? Why do I have to wait for Michael to say, hey, come to my wedding? Oh, God, good. I always wanted to travel to the Far East.
Right. I'm happy that people could use as an excuse that perhaps don't understand some of the where you go in your newest work. I'm happy that maybe that will actually get 1 or 2 people to have a major aha moment about themselves. It's not about me. It's about, hey, if they can use this as an excuse to perhaps take a first baby step. But you and I both know if you can't find that inciting incident inside yourself and you need to have these external forces drive you, it's probably not going to elicit the change that you might imagine.
No, but the interesting thing is there could be some type of serendipitous encounter by traveling there. So the excuse.
That's one of my favorite words all time. Yep. Serendipity.
Yeah.
Right. What's serendipity to you?
It's just a lucky happenstance. I gave a talk at a conference, and I did it for free because I liked the city and I wasn't busy. And I went out there and I got done and I bumped into somebody and developed a relationship. That was serendipity. That would not have happened had I not gone out there. I didn't make it happen. This other person didn't make it happen. It was just you put these things together and something happens. And so that's the issue is, how many things are you putting together? How many opportunities are you giving yourself to bump into things and to make things happen? If any entrepreneur would be honest with people, they would tell you, look, I lucked out. I had a meeting with X, Y, and Z. I never expected to. I was introduced to him by such and such. And if that didn't happen, nothing would have happened. But what we do is we go back in time and we recreate our history in order to create a story that sounds good And then we tell that story. And unfortunately, by doing that, we make other people think that there's this special secret sauce that you have to have in order to be successful, when in fact, it's not that at all. So you have to have an idea that serves people. You have to be passionate about it. And then you have to put yourself out there, and you have to be fortunate enough to bump in to the circumstances and people that bring that thing to life, because that's how it always happened.
Let's talk about that bumping into. If people don't have that bumping into experience early, if they don't experience that exactly where you're going, which is just that serendipity, something fabulous happens just because you chose to go one direction and then your path crosses with another direction, and it never would have happened if you didn't leap to begin with. But many people don't have that bump into experience. Getting back to the CV, back to the 7th grade, they've got this damn thing organized. I'm still amazed after the internet was launched, essentially in 1995 with the IPO of Netscape. I'm still amazed that if I flip on any news channel, any nightly news channel, I have politicians parroting back to the people, us, the masses, about jobs. I mean, it's like literally, what is being promised to people? That we are going to keep you in your prison. You are not allowed to escape anything that is abnormal, and not having a job is abnormal.
Well, that's the story, right? And in order to keep people calm, you have to tell them a story that they can buy into. I mean, that's what belief is all. Beliefs are a calming thing. That's why people have beliefs, because as soon as they believe something, they can stop thinking. They don't have to worry anymore. Oh, okay, fine. I'm going to have a job forever. I don't have to think about this. That's why you shouldn't really believe anything. I mean, if you want to hold this thing in your mind for a while, that's fine, but you better accept the other side of it as well and hold that in your mind and deal with that tension, because there is nothing that you should believe in, like, that is never going to change. Everything is going to change.
It's more about, when you say that, it's more about having a good life process as opposed to imagining that you can predict tomorrow.
Exactly. Look, if you don't enjoy the journey, whatever that journey, and it could also be a journey full of struggle, right? I mean, you want to take a movie, take Rocky, right? Rocky liked to box. He may have never got the shot with Apollo Creed. That wasn't the point. He was a fighter. That was what was in him. He enjoyed doing it. You want a real story? Take the band. The band loved to play music. The band didn't have to bump into Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan didn't have to say to these guys, hey, you guys are great. You want to go out on tour together? That was their serendipitous encounter. But that didn't matter. They loved playing music together. So that's the key, is to realize that the process is the goal, not some place in the future. Because when you get to that place in the future, it's never the thing that you're looking for anyway. You always look and you say, wow, I really enjoyed what we were doing before we got there.
Well, as you say in your work, life happens in each moment.
Yeah, exactly. And that sounds like Taoist, doesn't it? But it's absolutely the truth. I mean, what we're doing right now, having this conversation, I'm enjoying it. I'm not doing, and that's why I wanted to do this with you, because it's fun. It's enjoyable. It's meaningful. Now, will people bump into us, or me, or you? Maybe, and that's good too. But don't do it if you're not enjoying it and putting everything into it.
I thoroughly enjoy it. I feel privileged to have the ability, and it just, again, well, that's number 5, I guess, for me, deciding on a lark to start a podcast in January 2012.
There you go.
A trading podcast that somehow or another allows me to now talk to you, Tom, and you're not involved in trading. And, so let me jump back to something even more specific to our conversation today. You've got a new book out.
Yes.
I want to know, and I want you to outline for the audience the title. Because there's some backstory. There is some backstory there. So why don't you explain that for folks and let them know where I Am Keats came from. Full title being I Am Keats, Escape Your Mind and Free Yourself.
Really, really strange story. I went out to breakfast with a friend, and this was a few years ago, and I was down, just in general. I just didn't feel like I was really making a big difference. And we were talking, and he said something about his son, his older son, 20-something, that was living at home. And I said, well, what's wrong? He says, I don't know. The kid's so damn smart. We can't reason with him. And I said something like, well, it's his memory, because everything is based on your memory. That's all you have that informs your decisions, is what's in your brain that you stuck up there. And I said, too bad we couldn't wipe his memory out, and then we could go, steer him in a new direction. Tell him whatever we need to tell him to get him going. He smiled, and I left, and I couldn't get that crazy thought out of my mind. I said, wow, that's really interesting. So I said, that would make a great movie. I think I'm going to write a screenplay about two brothers, an older and younger brother, and it's the younger brother's birthday, and they go on this bike trip, and there's an accident, and the younger brother, he's a slacker, and the older brother is this executive at a movie studio, and this storytelling genius. And when the younger brother gets in the accident, he loses his memory. And so the older brother gets this crazy idea, because he's such a great storyteller, he's going to rewrite the younger brother's entire script and change his life and turn him into a successful, passionate guy. I told somebody about that, and they said, wow, you should do that. That sounds really cool. And I said, okay, I'm going to do it. And I said, well, how hard can this be? I've written a bunch of books. I can write a screenplay. So I sit down and I start reading and consulting and writing, and I realize a screenplay is not a book. It is nothing like a book. A screenplay is a blueprint for what a director of a film sees on a screen. So it's a description of what visually somebody sees on a screen. I discovered, and I think it was because I watched an interview with Craig Venter on 60 Minutes, I discovered I'm one of few people that cannot create visual memory. I can't see pictures in my mind's eye of anything. Like my kids' faces, I can't see that right now. I think conceptually, not in pictures. So I'm telling this woman at the gym this, and she said, what are you talking about? How do you remember things if you can't see pictures? I said, I can remember. I just can't visualize it. She said, that doesn't even make sense. She said, I can describe for you everything that's behind me. And I said, what? And she went on to say, over here is this, and this is there, and it's this color. I said, oh my goodness. I said, wait a minute. What if I tell you what I want the story to be, and you tell me what you see on screen, and we'll co-write this thing? And she said, okay. And Michael, that was it. That started this crazy 2-year adventure of writing this story. And the funny thing is while we're writing it, things start emerging all by themselves. Characters emerged, voices emerged. This idea of John Keats, a poet, a romantic poet, the greatest probably, popped out of nowhere. I don't even remember how his name came up. And then we found another romantic poet, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, who was also a critic. So his rational mind would come into play. And Keats couldn't stand that, because Keats as a poet thought that you just needed to let go of this thinking, categorizing, and just experience the beauty and freshness as if for the first time, like a child would. And those concepts became metaphors for the characters in the movie. Peter, which was the older brother, the successful storyteller, he was a control freak, thinking all the time. And his brother, Phil, he was the slacker, the kind of the poet, the feeling guy, the go with your gut child. And so we realized, wow, there's a tension in everyone between this intuitive feeling mind, this empathetic uncertainty and empathy, and this thinking mind, this manufactured, the stories and the goals and beliefs. Philosophies started spilling out of this thing. And by the time we got done with it, not only did we have a screenplay in our hands, but this book came out of it, which really dug deep into the philosophies that honestly, Michael, they just emerged. I can't tell you where they came from. In retrospect, I cannot even tell you how John Keats, the poet, came into this thing. It just did. That's the weird story of how this thing came about. Believe me, this woman that was helping me is more Keats than me, and she shut down my thinking mind on many, many occasions. Where's this thing going? I said, I need to know. We need to outline how it's going to end and what's going to happen in this scene. And she said, just let it talk to us. Let it tell us where it wants to go. Like you. Do a website, do a book, do a podcast. I just let it happen, and it just spilled out.
You got me thinking as you're talking, giving that great intro to where you are today, thinking conceptually versus visually. Once you said that, I kind of got stuck for a moment in my own head. I'm like, oh my God, what do I do? I think I might be right there with you on the conceptual. I don't know that I remember visual. I think I remember conceptual.
Well, listen, Michael, it's so strange. In my office, I have some very large oil paintings because I was a trained artist. I was going to paint. That's why I went to school, to be an artist. If you put something in front of me, I can paint it, and you would look at the painting and say, wow, that is just like amazing. If you said to me, draw a dog, you'd get something that a kid could do better than, because I can't in my mind see a dog. But if you put it in front of me, I can reproduce it or create art from.
I wonder how many people are relating to that right now. I wonder if did you know the percentages of where the population breaks down on this conceptual versus visual memory?
Yeah, I think it's maybe upwards of 10% now. I've been trying to, and the interesting thing is that the cognitive, psychologists and some of the brain scientists, they've done studies to prove that it's not that you don't store a visual image, because they have ways of testing that. It seems to be that you can't retrieve it.
Can't access it, yeah.
Yeah, so that's my problem. I'm probably storing these images, but I can't get them.
But when you see it again in front of you, it's like the light is right there. And it's like, does it feel like sometimes the memory connects when you see it in front of you?
No. I remember I was at a conference and somebody came up, shook my hand. I think he was from ESPN or something. And we talked for, I don't know, maybe 2 minutes. And then he said, look, I got to go. And he turned around and he walked away. And I was with a few other people. And I said, geez, I forgot to give him my card. And I turned around. I could not recognize the guy. I had to have one of the people with me point him out.
Okay, I might not be as bad as you.
Oh, yeah. This is what I'm listen, I have problems like where I have to park in the same spot when I go to the airport because I won't find my car.
Let me pull this back some, though. You give this nice intro about where your newest work has gone, but I want to kind of keep giving people some flavor as to why this is important. And I love this one passage from your work. It says, people in general already believe that they're better and smarter than average. It's a cognitive bias called illusory superiority. And the internet is making this bias even more extreme. It's supercharging people's preconceptions and solidifying their false assumptions. There's a lot of things to unpack in that passage from yours right there. I would love to kind of go into the internet part. I see this across Facebook. I love to start debate and perhaps argument on Facebook, not ad hominem stuff, but if I see an inconsistency or if I see hypocrisy in whatever, I like to comment on it. And it's often in charged areas where there's deep emotion. It still amazes me the numbers of people, if faced with an obvious inconsistency, an obvious hypocrisy, and if they had to imagine themselves being in a courtroom with jury instructions, I mean, they still might go wrong. But people are really losing the ability to look at details and make good decisions because they are so burdened. They're so burdened by that story inside their head or whatever they have to protect that it's really difficult for them to get off the train ride they're on. They can't do it, most of them.
That's why we chose Keats, and Keats has this, and it was only used once in a letter, I think, to his brothers, but this whole idea of negative capability, which he called the ability, to be in uncertainties and mysteries and doubts, the ability to hold these conflicting opinions in your mind without searching for certainty, without grasping for an answer. And that's the thing that people can't do because, Michael, their identities are tied to these beliefs. And when you say something that even questions their belief, they feel that their identity has been threatened.
It's a war. It's a war at that moment.
Right. And you're right. That's why beliefs are bad, because beliefs are polarizing. Right? If you believe this and I believe this, well, then we're done.
Peel back that onion some. For example, if we believe there are some concrete things in life. I mean, I'm looking at a bottle of green tea. I can think about calculus or probability or something. So speak to the idea where people might think that you and I are in this Zen squishy place where there's no solid. Speak to that. I think that might confuse people when you say to not have any belief.
Yeah, I know, because people say that to me all the time. So belief is driven by a desire. That's where belief come from. The word leaf means like the old English is to wish. So a belief is something that you desire to be true. So if you believe that, I don't know, that taking vitamin C will prevent colds, well, you do because you wish that to be true, and that's why you buy it and pop them in your mouth. If you're doing that, you are now rationalizing through the information that you can find that you're right. So now you look at this belief and your identity is weaved into it. So now somebody says to you, vitamin C doesn't do anything for the common cold. Now, this is a small example, and we can go into the more charged ones like religion and politics and everything. But immediately you have a visceral reaction to that because you say, well, I'm not stupid. I wouldn't be doing anything that wasn't right. And, I'm an intelligent person. I checked it. And so your mind, instead of saying, let me hold that in my mind, that tension, it does, it doesn't. And let me try to make sense of that. Instead of doing that, your mind feels this tension. The psychologists call it cognitive dissonance. And you immediately dismiss one of those. And it's usually the one that you are not doing, the one that you don't desire, the one that you don't believe in. And so what you do to do that is you go find some information that will back up your position. And I don't care what position you have, you can find information to back it up. That's how it works.
A great example of that, without mentioning any specifics, if people look at the last 1 year in America on political debates, whether you were on the left or the right, cognitive dissonance should have been and should be historically the only thing the summation should start with. The political summation of the 2016 election should start with, and this election was about cognitive dissonance. That's the historical artifact of the United States of America, because on both sides, it was overwhelming.
I can tell you that whole process was driven by people's identities. You know what I mean? It wasn't a rational, a computer couldn't have come up with this, because a computer, you would have punched in criteria and then hit a button and said, okay, which one gives us the best? It didn't work like that, because people were voting based on what they wanted to see happen, based on what their feelings and their desires were. And I'm going to tell you, primarily that was driven by identity.
Let's talk certainty. People crave certainty. They want certainty. I look at my world writing these investing, trading books. They want to know what will happen tomorrow. They want to know that this person can predict or tell them with assurance, this will be it. And when you get behind the scenes and you talk to the highest level achievers and the highest level thinkers, they exist perpetually only in uncertainty, and they are extremely comfortable in uncertainty, and they don't wake up each day worried about that they don't know everything because they have a plan, they have a process for dealing with the next unexpected, because there's always going to be another unexpected. But my gosh, I would surely say the vast majority of any population imagines that certainty is achievable.
Exactly. And that's one of the three components that drive people to make particular decisions in whatever it is, brands, consultants, software. They are looking for this sense of control, right? Because they don't want the future to be something that's nebulous. They want to believe that the bridge that they're crossing is safe, and that it's going to get them to the place they want to go. So anyone who paints a picture that gives them that assurance, they win. Now, unfortunately, they're not telling these people, look, this is a gamble. This is a bet. You know, it was funny. I was reading a book. I don't remember the consultant's name. It might have been John Kay. But there was a book, Obliquity. And he says, you know what was interesting is we're selling these models, these strategic models of how to make sure that certain things occur in the future to these big corporations. And he says, and as a group, as a consulting group, he said, we never use those models. But they like the feeling of certainty. See, it's not certainty and it's not control. It's the feeling of certainty and control, right? Because everyone wants something in the future. They don't want something today, because today they have what they have today.
Your newest work is going to cause people that want certainty. And if I just talk about the structure of your book, for those people that want to buy books that say, here are the 10 steps to happiness, and follow them in order, starting at number 1, don't skip 4 and get to 10 and life will be fine. So what I like about how you describe the structure of this work is, you know, it's not a linear narrative. And there are, you know, really this work of yours, you could probably pick up at any page and start reading and grab something from what you've written. And I've always liked that style of reading. However, I do think I'm in the minority. I think most people really want that certainty that if you follow these 26.5 steps, that you will reach Shangri-La.
You know, it's funny, Michael. I purposefully, in my last book, the first 2 sections of the book, so for section 1, I laid it out, how the brain works. And then the second section, I gave like 10 steps to create belief. And then in the third section, once I got people to go, all right, I got the 10 steps. Then in the third section, I said, you don't want to follow any of these things. I tried to show them that those 10 steps to achieving belief, that is the game that people are playing on you to make you feel comfortable, to pull you in it with aesthetics and identity, to give you a sense of control. But you have to understand this is a game and your mind is being played. So instead of doing that, here's how you step out of it. All I've done with this book is taken that last section and blown it up and say, look, you are hypnotized by some kind of illusion that there is some type of linear path of certainty to getting success and happiness. It is an illusion. It does not exist. It's manufactured by the external world in order to get you to conform and to play a particular game. And if we all do that, then we have a stable society and marketplace and structure. The bad news about all that stability is you wake up someday when you're 40 or 50 years old and you say, what the hell just happened? I didn't really enjoy this.
Well, you know, the funny thing about books, I think when I'm thinking about how you put your structure together, laid out that structure, I think back to my first book, and it was different topic, but very similar in the sense that I wasn't thinking in a linear fashion. But when that first book had some success and I got a major publisher for the second book, and I did something similar with the second book, and I remember the publisher getting it, and I turned in the first manuscript. They had paid a lot of money for an advance. They basically were like, what is this? They said, we need a narrative. It has to be a narrative. It has to be a straight line. On the flip side, the way my mind really thinks, and last night I was working on an edit of a new edition of a book, and I added in a Miles Davis quote right out of the blue. I just decided to add it because he made this statement, and I'm paraphrasing a little. I think it's like, he's like, after you play the note or the wrong note, that's not important. What's important is what you play next.
Yeah. I think that's in my book too, I think, somewhere.
Yeah, I think that's where I saw it. And I was like, oh my gosh, I've got that same thing in mind. And what I love about that, though, too, is that that's just not the way people think. Well, I shouldn't say that's not the way people think, but the way that I want to approach things is I want to make it like an Easter egg hunt. And if you open up any page, for example, look, you've got that one great George Lucas quote right there in the beginning of your book. We are all living in cages with the door wide open. Now, if somebody is honest with themselves, okay, for whatever the price of your book is, if they're honest, we are all living in cages with the door wide open. That quote is worth for Tom to find it from Lucas and to remind us all and put it in print. What is that worth? If one is being honest about what Lucas is saying, we're all living in cages with the door wide open, meaning we can do anything. It's in our mind that we're electing not to do anything. So I love the idea of the nuggets, the Easter egg hunt, the nonlinearity, because frankly, that's life. That's right to your bumping into. That's right to your serendipity. That's right to Miles Davis and playing the next note.
No, you're right. And I think, to paraphrase, I think he said, the next note you play will determine whether the last one was good or bad. Something like that. So in essence, life is not predetermined. It unfolds, and it's the same thing with all of our decisions. It could be that the next book Michael writes all of a sudden validates everything he's ever done and makes everything that he did in the past look brilliant. And so it's always it's what we're doing, what we're driven by, what's the next thing, and how do we float in this uncertainty? Because that's the killer right now. That's what that quote I put by Leonard Cohen from the song, where he says, the blizzard of the world has crossed the threshold and it has overturned the order of the soul. What he's saying is that rationality, goal setting, beliefs, stories, being self-concerned, that's the blizzard of the world. And it has overturned the order of the soul. The spirit, the universe of possibility. Keats, having this uncertainty and this empathy and this receptiveness to whatever life throws at you while you're out there doing this. And the crazy thing is all these big brands I talk to and I work with, they love to tell founder stories. But they're nothing like their founder stories. Because the people who founded these companies, they were out there just trying to create a movement. They didn't have a plan. They made stuff, threw it in the back of a buggy and went around showing it to people. But ask some of these big companies to do that today. Take a risk. And they'll come back and say, no. We have a process of, if you can't show that it's going to make 50 million in the first year, we don't even consider it.
You're getting at the idea of hedging bets. Not many people, when you go back and look at the beginning of their stories, they weren't hedging their bets. They jumped off. In fact, someone sent me a book the other day. They said, hey, you might want to check this book out, kind of like saying, hey, maybe this would be a nice guest for your show. And the book was essentially saying how to not change anything in your life, keep everything the same, but become an entrepreneur with 10% of your time. And I was just like, my God, what kind of crazy, convoluted, contorted, do you have to be to try and believe that to begin with, and then to try and execute it is impossible, because how the hell, and I'm going to use the big name here, how the hell do you compete with Steve Jobs if you're going to stay in your office cube all day long and pretend that you're competing with somebody who is living and breathing this, whatever their passion is, 24/7, and you're going to do it on a part-time, maybe halfway lift a finger? It doesn't work that way.
No, you're right. You're right. I was actually talking to somebody today about Apple, and how they're not hitting their numbers. We were discussing how they're going to go into, original TV programming and movies. And I said, it's so interesting. When Jobs was running it, he had a feeling for something that people would want. I said, now Apple is looking at the marketplace saying, what do they want? We'll give that to them. And it's completely different. It's not arising from your imagination, from this uncertain idea, this gut feeling that you have. It's coming from data. And you can't create from data. You create from the soul. You create from your inside, not from the outside.
It's an interesting choice that Apple made, and who should it be for me and you to criticize one of the most successful companies around? But it's really interesting choice that you go from the visionary Steve Jobs, and then he probably single-handedly implemented, basically, as far as I can tell, a manager or an accountant to be the current CEO, whereas on the backbench, and perhaps a guy like Jonathan Ive, their designer, didn't want to do it. But when I watch a video of Jonathan Ive talking about his creations, I'm inspired. Like, I just want to listen to that guy all day long. When Tim Cook starts talking, I just okay, can I turn the TV off? And it's an interesting choice that the company has made. And again, we don't know all the reasons for this, but to keep their influential and inspirational minds not at the forefront and to leave just another suit at the head of the company. It's an interesting choice.
That is a perfect metaphor right there. Because that's in my book, that is the metaphor that I use for Keats and Coleridge. Coleridge is driven by the world, by his thinking mind, by data, by what works, by what's safe, by the best, like you said, the best risk assessment. Keats, that's not who Keats is. Keats inspired. Keats feels something, thinks that other people will feel it too. And he's driven by that. And he creates based on that and get out of his way. All I'm saying, I'm not saying that Coleridge isn't necessary. I'm not saying that the thinkers and the engineers and the data guys, they are necessary. What I'm saying is don't let them lead.
Tom, it's always good to chat with you. I appreciate you coming on today. And one last point that I would like to add, though, too, is we talk about the Keats direction, and I do know some of these folks. So this doesn't necessarily mean that Tom is proposing that you go off on the sojourn to the desert and walk for 40 years, 50 years, and not really take on any battles in life. So there is that line of where you are looking for people to find that balance there. It's not necessarily just to kind of it could be someone's calling to go to a monastery in Tibet. That could absolutely be their calling. But I think you're looking for a little more balance here.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think that sometimes people read this and they think that I have a problem with the rational thinking process. And that is the furthest thing from the truth. What I have a problem with is I have a problem with that particular mindset interfering with that creative process. Keep it out. Use that when you want to introduce what you're doing to the world and to get the world to look at it and see it and to appreciate it. Absolutely. When you're designing a bridge, keep the engineers out of there until you're ready to sit down and say, here's my design. How do we build it? Then bring them in.
And that's what kind of happens across the world with all of our big cities. When someone's building a new skyscraper, if they let the engineers build the damn things, it would be a square box every time.
Well, but listen, sometimes that's what they do, right? And yet if you bring in the creative people, and I remember once that I can't remember what school it was. It might have been out here in the Northeast, but they built the buildings, and then they said, okay, it's time to lay the paths, to pave the paths that the students are going to walk on. And this creative person said, no, let's not do that. Let's let all the students just walk to the buildings and to the classes. Let's see what paths they make in the grass. Then we'll pave those paths. That's what I'm talking about.
Tom, It is always fun. I'm waiting for the next book that we can chat through. I don't know if these are really, it's kind of, I say book, of course it is a book, but it's really just getting into your headspace for a period of time. So it's always fun to jump in and see what's going on inside the cranium there.
Thanks, Mike. Listen, I really enjoy it. And I'll tell you what, I have decided to do the exact opposite of what everyone else in the world does. So instead of turning a novel into a screenplay, we have taken the screenplay and we're turning it into a novel. It should be done in a couple of months, and I'm going to make sure you're one of the first to get it.
Tom, I appreciate it. Hey, where can we send people in the near term to check you out, your newest workout?
Yeah, send them to IamKeats.com. And they'll be able to see the book and something about the screenplay. There's a lot of information there.
Tom, till next time, take care.
Thanks, Michael. I appreciate it.
I see a time when those awake will understand how to make money in up, down, and surprise markets. Whether new trader or experienced, college student or financial advisor, protecting against a crash, or just trying to make a lot of money, trend following offers everyone an answer in uncertain times. To get started immediately, send me an email, michael@covel.com. I will send you the right trend following steps to take along with my free video. But if you want to buy and hold, trust the government and trust Wall Street, this is absolutely not for you.